In 2013, during the Iowa State Fair, a man named Jason Powell went to the fairgrounds to do something he believed his Christian faith required of him: publicly share his religious message. What followed led to a federal lawsuit and an important court decision about free speech, public spaces, and how far the government can go in regulating expression. Jason Powell stood on sidewalks near the entrances of the Iowa State Fair. These sidewalks were publicly owned and located outside the paid admission area. Powell held signs and spoke to people walking by. He wasn't blocking traffic, and he wasn't causing a disturbance. However, Fair Patrol officers approached him and told him he had to leave. They warned him that if he stayed, he could be arrested for trespassing. Powell left, but returned the next day to continue evangelizing. This time, officers again told him to leave. Eventually, a state trooper issued Powell a formal ejection notice, banning him from the fairgrounds for the rest of the fair. Powell believed this violated his constitutional rights. Powell sued several state officials in federal court. He argued that his First Amendment right to free speech had been violated because he was expressing religious views on public sidewalks. He also raised a due process claim, arguing that the rules used to remove him were unclear and vague and gave officers too much discretion. Powell asked the court for a preliminary injunction, essentially an order stopping the state from enforcing these rules at the fair while the case continued. The district court denied part of his request, and Powell appealed to the United States Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit. The appeals court focused on two main questions. First, was Powell likely to succeed on his claim that his free speech rights were violated? And second, were the rules used to remove him so unclear that they violated due process? The Eighth Circuit ruled against Powell on the free speech issue, at least for purposes of the injunction. The court explained that during the state fair, the fairgrounds, including the sidewalks, functioned as a limited public forum. That means the government can impose reasonable, viewpoint-neutral restrictions to manage safety, crowd flow, and operations. The court found that the restrictions placed on Powell were not based on what he was saying, but on concerns like pedestrian congestion and safety at a large public event. Because Powell had other ways and locations to express his message, the court ruled he was not likely to win his First Amendment claim at that stage. However, the appeals court did not decide the due process question. Instead, it sent that issue back to the district court, noting that the lower court had not yet fully addressed whether the rules used to eject Powell were unconstitutionally vague. So while Powell lost on the free speech injunction, the fairness and clarity of the rules themselves remained unresolved. Powell v. Noble shows how courts balance individual free speech rights against the government's responsibility to manage large public events. It also highlights an important distinction. Even protected speech can be regulated in certain settings, but the rules used to regulate it must still be clear, fair, and lawful. In short, the court said the speech restriction was allowed for now, but the question of whether the rules were written and enforced fairly wasn't over yet.